And now I'm excited to introduce you formally to the three mayors on our stage today. Mayor Steve Adler, the City of Austin, Mayor Victor Gonzales, the City of Pflugerville, and Mayor Craig Morgan, the City of Round Rock. And I echo what Mike Maroney said. Thank you for your public service. It's not easy to run a city, and we know that this job is a tough one, and we appreciate you giving your time and talents to make our cities better and brighter. So my first question. We just closed the 86th legislative session. And as we know, it's not always the best of relationships, but I'm wondering, how did our region fare with different forms of legislation that passed in the session? I'll start with you, Mayor Adler.
Well,
I can't imagine what you might talk about.
I will say I'm happy they've gone home.
And I'm going to ask you to bring, these microphones aren't great at picking up voices, so yeah, thank you.
So I'm happy they've gone home.
You're happy they've gone home?
I think that the answer is that it was bad, but it could have been worse. You know, obviously they did some good things. They took a step forward with respect to school funding. That net probably is an additional $85 million to AISD and to our other districts. That's good. The bad part is that there was no fundamental or institutional change that drove that additional funding. So I'm real worried about whether that can be sustained for 2 years or 4 years without a fundamental change. But at least it's $80 million more money. It'll lead to some tax compression. We're on a $300,000 home. I think there's about a $240 savings. So that's a step in the right direction. But the property tax cap, the revenue tax cap in the city, if we keep our existing budget the way that it is, we're $58 million upside down in 3 years. Which is going to require us to make cuts in the existing budget. It's going to make it harder to add the things that are not in the existing budget that we wanted, like sexual assault officers to help with caseload, or scaling up the homeless program that we had, where we took half the homeless children off the street last year. We would have otherwise intended to scale that. We still probably need to figure out how to do that, but it means that something else is going to have to be cut. All the while, tax savings for the typical taxpayer in our region in exchange for that is about $1.80 a month. So this cap on cities and counties was not about property tax relief. It's pretty much show. But it's going to have real consequences, and that's going to be hard. The legislature took $170 million out of local governments and gave it to the telecom industry. They came in and complained that the fees they've been paying for years are too high, and the legislature accommodated them by preempting cities on the existing fees they were charging. It was just a straight handover. So with that, we lost $6 million out of our budget. So, but we held on to sick leave, and we held on to fair chance hiring, and a lot of the preemption stuff.
So kind of a mixed bag at the legislature this year. Mayor Gonzales, I know that your community looks different than Austin. So what about regional issues that are impacted by the legislature in your mind for Pflugerville?
Well, I think, as you've all heard, that Pflugerville is the third fastest growing city in the area, and it's going to be a challenge to live up to that brand, especially with, as Mayor Adler has already said, and I'll echo what he said, but it does present some challenges for communities such as ours. We've been growing, and I've always said we've been growing at warp speed. I told Judy when I first could read the population sign, it said 272 people. It's 65,000 today. So we are looking, and coming from a regional perspective, we have become, and I've said this for years now, have become more of a regional community, especially with 130 and 45, as part of our infrastructure that has actually added a lifeline and some huge development to our area. So we have challenges in the area of infrastructure. We have challenges in terms of growth and planning for that growth, and because we're looking into the ATJ, obviously we're growing We're almost in the Elgin School District, well, very close to it. So the growth has been immense. We are challenged by that. Now we're challenged with how we will invest the resources that we have, and somewhat more limited now in that we can only plan so far into the future in terms of infrastructure. Infrastructure brings development, brings growth, brings prosperity to our community. So that's not to say we can't meet the challenges. Certainly we can, and we just have to take a different perspective on it. And we hope that at the end of the day that it doesn't impact our community, as Mayor Adler said, from public services, safety, infrastructure, water resources. Those are all challenges that a city deals with every day. And so it'll be there for us tomorrow, and we're going to step up to it.
Mayor Morgan, 86th Legislature, wins, losses for Round Rock.
Well, I agree with Mayor Adler. I know in Round Rock we were a recapture district, and for us, for the next 2 years, we know we will not have a recapture payment, and so that will save the average taxpayer in Round Rock ISD upwards of about $478. But as been mentioned up here, the Senate Bill 2, and what was interesting for me is you'd hear certain people in the state leadership say it was property tax relief, and then you'd hear some people say after it was passed, the own bill writer said, well, no, this is not property tax relief. And then when they had the signing, it wasn't property tax relief. And then there were a couple of tweets when all the backpatting was going on. It is property tax relief. So I don't know what it is. For my citizens, it's about $6 on the average home, and in Round Rock. And you know, we're a high growth city. We will survive it. But we will have to look at some major cuts as we move forward. And I got slammed in the paper by some of my favorite groups the other day for quoting what cities are going to have to do. And so the city of Round Rock, what we will have to really examine is our fees that we charge our citizens. And some of the people in our ETJ do not have charge the same fee. We let them use it at the price of a citizen. And so I could make an argument in the first year you'll probably see a property tax increase because cities are going to have to really look and analyze how close do you go to that 8%. Because if you're in a high growth city and you don't do that, then the compression next year will be devastating to some of these fast growing cities. And so, you know, I don't know where it's gone wrong in the sense of, you know, the state was founded on local control. And as I mentioned in there, they were quoting some of the state leadership about that they'll close the door if these cities are trying to get an end around. I invite any of that state leadership to come to Round Rock and see what we've done and how we have been fiscally responsible. And to our detriment in some ways, we have a very low tax rate, and now that we've been capped,
right,
we're being punished for that because now we can't raise the revenues at some cities that are upwards of 60, 70 cents. So, but I do want to commend them on the school finance. I have the same concerns as Mayor Adler. I don't know what the sustainability is because they're doing a lot of makeup right now. And so there is going to be, I think, some structural deficits. And so we'll see how they handle it.
I think everybody agrees school finance reform is a step in the right direction. So is there a way to combat this very tangible tension between local governments and state legislators? I mean, I know that you all probably, I know the city of Austin has lobbyists, but what can be done? Can we bring you all together and have a kumbaya moment or something? I mean, really, it really is amazing how this becomes this friction every session between local control and the lawmakers. So is there anything that we could do to make it more balanced? Have you guys listened to one another?
Well, I'll jump in on that one.
I saw that look, Mayor Adler.
You know, I've been in elected office for over 12 years, and I've met a lot of elected officials throughout the state in my association with the Texas Municipal League. I know a lot of mayors in the state of Texas, as well as our local mayors, and we've become very close in terms of the type of collaboration and initiatives that we've taken with each other and serving on the same boards. So I think for us, outside of the lobbyist, I think it's imperative that we as elected officials and elected officials in general make a connection with our state legislators and not just give them a call and say hello. Get to know them, get them to know us. And I think we need to deliver that message across the state as we visit with other elected officials throughout our service in different environments, whether it's Texas Municipal Conferences, training sessions. Find out what's happening there and find out if they're having a connection with their legislator, because it's imperative they know. I've recently become connected with our state representative in Round Rock. I mean, I think he represents about 6 people in the city of Pflugerville, but he's still our representative. And so it's imperative. We've got some new generation of elected officials in the legislature. I think they're receptive to understanding and listening, so we have to deliver that message.
Okay. Courtney, do you have some questions from the audience yet?
I have quite a few.
I knew you would.
So first question, how will the property tax cap impact public health and healthcare funding?
Who wants to tackle? Will that impact?
I don't think we know yet. We obviously do not know yet what the specific cuts are going to be, or where the adds are in the budget as well. I mean, there's going to be a trade-off. We know that we have to net down, but we don't know, and this council won't know until we see the manager's budget, which he's now talking to council members. That'll come back at the end of July. And then we have all of August as a council and a community to discuss that. But what we do know is that in our $1 billion general fund budget, we have to cut the equivalent of almost $60 million. We know that 80% of our budget is salaries for people. We know that 70% of our budget is public safety. It's going to be impossible for us to make cuts without having impacts, throughout our budget. We have gone through a process as a council, and Mayor Pro Tem is here. We've gone through a budget process where we've set priorities, and this council and this community have set really high among our priorities things like housing and homelessness and a lot of the health and human service issues. So I know there's going to be a lot of fighting and battling to preserve and create new programs, but it may mean that we have to take a look at some of the old programs and see how they align with the current priorities.
It's budget time right now, so in August especially, so I know that's when those issues will come to light. One more question from the audience, Courtney?
Sure. So we got a few environmental questions. So what are your cities doing to address climate change?
That's a good one. Mayor Gonzales, you want to start with that? It's not always a local control issue,
yeah, it's
climate
not a local
change,
control.
but
well, in terms of climate change, I know that we are part of CAPCOG, Capital Area Planning Organization, and they have a subcommittee on air quality, and certainly we participate in that. We actually provide some funding to that particular subgroup to monitor air quality in the region, and we've got some quality air stations out in, obviously all over in Travis County and Pflugerville, and so it's imperative that we always keep aware of ozone levels. We get reports on that all the time, and so we do the best we can to impact our environment that way. Also, we were one of the early cities to do the recycling program, where we didn't have a recycling program, so we're very concerned about that. There was some legislation, I think, at the legislature this year regarding recycling, especially since China is telling us now that they're not wanting a lot of our recycling materials because of the contamination and so forth. So I think it's imperative that cities and communities, I know the city of Austin does a great job in that area, but we're going to have to do a better job.
anybody else want to weigh in on before we start taking a dive on some of the other issues?
Along with what, for us, what Mayor Gonzales said, we have a recycling program. We've looked at ways of expanding the recycling program. The other thing we really looked at was our fleet vehicles. Really were aging, and so we have almost totally turned that over to more fuel efficient fleet. So we're looking at all ways to do our part as the city and in that area.
And I know, Mayor Adler, we could probably talk for an hour about everything Austin's doing toward climate change, but you want to give us a quick synopsis of some of the highlights of some of the things that Austin's doing to improve the environment?
The most important thing we could be doing with our carbon footprint is dealing with the energy generation. That's our biggest contributor, and we're on track to close the Fayette coal plant on the timing we had discussed with the community in just a few years. That'll be real important. The solar generation, we just entered into a contract now. The prices are so low that every renewable contract we enter into now averages down our utility rates. And then transportation, obviously, we're electrifying the fleet, putting up more and more charging stations, and right now the 3 cities that lead the country in that effort are LA, New York, and Austin.
And if everyone doesn't know, this is a green building, and one of the things about this library is, believe it or not, I think they reuse about 85% of the water here, so they don't have to buy water from the city of Austin. Not much, at least. I want to drill down on some regional issues, and I know that there's a Central Texas Regional Mayors Coalition that includes Austin, Round Rock, Georgetown, San Marcos, San Antonio, Kyle, and Buda. And I'm assuming this was created to deal with some of these regional issues. So has that helped, and I'll start with you, Mayor Adler, has that helped address some of these key issues that impact us, not just as an individual city, but as a Central Texas community?
I think it's real clear that the challenges we each face in our cities are more regionally dependent than they've ever been, and the communication between mayors is much greater and much more frequent than it's ever been. We were able to get together 50 Central Texas communities to propose an environmental regulation in just west of here, and the thought that we would have proposed something collectively on environment communities would have been unheard of 5 years ago. And we proposed it and asked the state administrative body to let us argue for it and set it for a hearing, and they looked at it and decided it was a good idea. Now they've adopted it as their own and are publishing it in the Register. We're doing a lot more things in Campo, regionally, working with each other. We're getting together better to identify as regionally significant projects things that there's consensus on. We just did that with I-35, with the potential to do something about that road.
There's a problem with I-35?
Some say.
Mayor Morgan, is there something that Round Rock has gained from this relationship, this coalition, something that you feel like has been more easily addressed, having the help of and perspective of the other cities?
Sure. I think, I serve on Campo with the chairman, who happens to be Mr. Adler. And, just the relationship to talk and see some of the challenges that Austin has faced. I mean, Austin's clearly the economic engine of this region, but I would make a strong argument that Round Rock's not just a suburb anymore. It's becoming its own city, and we're facing some of the issues that Austin faced way back when it was a small, sleepy town. And so hopefully we can stay ahead of the curve, because there's been lessons learned, right? Mm-hmm. And to be able to have that perspective from, the mayors that have served in Austin. We recently, a couple of years ago, entered into an agreement with Cap Metro, and one of our busiest routes is from downtown Round Rock to downtown Austin, and we just expanded it. And so if we can get some cars off the road coming into Austin, then that only helps. The other thing is we really are focusing on our regional economic development efforts, because I can make some arguments that if you keep the jobs up in Round Rock, then people won't be coming in down to Austin. And so there'll be challenges. It's I-35 clearly is a mess, but
Mopac's not too far.
And Mopac's not too far. But I think we've got to be open to all ideas and alternatives. And that's the thing that I've always told people. We may all have a R or a D behind our name, but I would make an argument that what city issues deal with, they're not R or D issues, they're people issues. And if people don't start thinking like that, then you know, it makes it tough. And I think to your point about what can we do with the legislature, well, the legislature runs on party tickets. They've got groups that are very influential. And so when we're sitting down at the local level trying to deal with just true people issues, I'm talking about roads, water, parks, quality of life, it's not a Republican Democrat issue. And that's the challenge I see from me. And when I speak up on an issue that doesn't agree with my party, go read Twitter. It's they love me. So but I'm going to stand up for my our citizens, and I'm going to do what our citizens are demanding. And it doesn't always agree with either party, quite frankly. And so, but I do think it helps when we can have these conversations.
Sure.
And it seems like we have a very open line of communication. Campo, just over the couple of years that I've been on it, it seems like there's more communication and understanding that what may be right for Austin may not exactly be right for Round Rock, but we're not going to do things to inhibit or hurt Austin, and Austin's not going to do things that hurt Round Rock in the transportation network. So.
And Mayor Gonzales, I noticed, so Pflugerville's not part of this coalition, but I'm sure that you are dealing with similar issues. What do you think is the single biggest issue impacting the Pflugerville area right now?
Well, I think the biggest issue that's impacting Pflugerville right now is our growth. As we talked earlier today, we have subdivisions that are popping up right and left on the east side of 130. The tollways have become basically a driver for growth and economic development in Pflugerville. And we were talking earlier about transportation. Transportation and growth are connected. How do you move people around to and from their jobs, to and from shopping, to and from other communities? The tollway has, we're talking about 35 being a mess. The tollway has increasingly gotten a little more complicated to drive on in peak hours. Obviously, TxDOT has funded some additional lanes there, which will help, definitely will help, but I think that has been one of the areas that challenges us the most, is how to move people, where people are moving to, and how we as a city move them around the city. And infrastructure is not cheap. It's probably one of our biggest expenses in our city, probably any city. And so and that's why the relationship we have on Campo is imperative, because we're able to talk about, and we're recently planning for some town hall meetings in our community regarding transportation and transit, and the future of where we want routes to go and the transit lines and transportation areas that we need to address. So growth, transportation are the biggest.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk more about transportation, because I have a feeling that in 2020, Austin's going to have a transportation bond of some sort on the ballot dealing with mass transit. Let's talk about Central Texas as a region when it comes to transportation, because it's all connecting with more people moving out to Pflugerville and Round Rock and other places because of the affordability issues in Austin. It's all tied. What can we do to promote this idea that we can't all be in our cars, that we might have to embrace what other communities have embraced, and that's mass transit? So are we working on a regional plan, or is Austin's plan going to impact all the other cities around us? Or go ahead, Mayor Adler, take that one.
I would say that there is no Austin plan. There's only a regional plan.
Right.
And the plan that's been proposed and that people are now talking about is, in fact, a regional plan. We have every morning a huge percentage of the people in the region commute to downtown, and 74% of the people commuting to downtown are alone in their cars. By 2043, whatever it is, when we're at 2 million people in the city and 4 million people in the region, double what we are just a few years ago, if we're still at 74%, nobody's moving. So we have to give people choices. We have to give people additional options on ways to get in and out of downtown. So the regional plan that is presented by CAP Metro and Project Connect is one that has dedicated pathway lines that go from city line to city line with large park and ride facilities throughout the city so that people can get in and out of town. You know, we have the managed lanes right now on MOPAC. Those managed lanes have increased ridership on transit by 70%. Because now, not stuck in traffic, these buses are going by. We need to do the same thing on South MOPAC, so we can put park and rides down there and get transit to that part of town. We need to do the same thing on I-35. But the Project Connect plan has a dedicated line that goes from Lamar in the north all the way through the city to Congress, all the way to the south. Riverside out to the airport in the east, then coming downtown. And so yes, I hope that we're voting on that in November of 2020. It will be our last best attempt, and I think the appropriate one this time with learned experience to actually pass a mass transit, dedicated pathways for much of it.
I'm glad you said this time because twice in the past, Austin's voted down mass transit for various reasons. So do you feel like this one has a much better shot because the timing is right? Why do you think this time around Austin will say, yes, we want to spend this money?
Because I think it's begun with a regional plan. And in the past, it was one line we were looking at, and people looked at that one line and tried to figure out how that impacted them, and quite frankly, it didn't impact most people. This has begun with a much larger plan, and it's a regional plan, and it shows how it's pointing out to Pflugerville and to Round Rock and to Buda and to the region. And what the conversation that we'll have here over the next year is we're going to do this regional plan. Where do we start? What do we do first? What has the greatest initial impact? And I think that's an entirely different approach. And I think the conversation about mode, is it bus rapid transit or is it rail, is a conversation that's going to be held publicly with data. And I think that in past proposals, people felt like decisions had already been made and they weren't participating in them. We're trying to make sure that we go through all of the lessons learned in the past because, like I say, I think this is our last real shot at getting this done, and it is our region's Achilles heel. If we can't deliver on this, then our upside, as a community, our quality of life, will be very much limited.
Would you all agree with that synopsis?
And I think it's becoming more and more of a reality. Obviously, you know, that's one of the big issues that our citizens have is traffic congestion and time spent in the cars and so forth. We recently had a meeting on Pflugerville's transit plan that incorporates looking at extending out through Hutto as well and bringing them into the process and a system where we have transit hubs that are connecting in Pflugerville that connect to a Howard Lane that connect on even the managed tollway on MOPAC. So we're beginning to look at those things, and I think from a realistic perspective, I think they're inevitable, and I think that we seriously need to take it, the citizens need to take it seriously.
Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would just agree on most of everything that was said here. I mean, we've got a transportation plan in Round Rock that we just approved, a $1.2 billion worth of roads, and it does include some kind of form of transit. But I think that's where the communication lines, and that's where I appreciate the leadership of Mayor Adler to bring the regional cities in play to see what is our role. And how do we keep that connectivity? It may not be, as I said, it may not be a rail all the way up to Round Rock, but if we've got transit by bus down to a position where you can get on the rail, then it accomplishes the same goals. The other thing, this is where sometimes I think it takes some leadership at the state level as transportation funding. And several years back, John Corona, state senator in Dallas, proposed a local option tax. And I don't think that was discussed any this session, where it allows your locals to vote. And they're talking about let your locals have control. that's an opportunity to allow them to vote to give us money to implement these plans where you don't have to do it all on the back of the property tax system. So it's going to be a challenge because it's got a big dollar amount behind it, but we've got to educate our citizens on it, and I think they all understand how important it is, and I think even in the regional cities, I think they understand how important it is because a lot of them are coming down into Austin to work.
Courtney, what questions do our audience members have?
So what's being done to address the shrinking Black or African American population in Austin, and how is this impacting the surrounding areas?
Great question. Mayor, do you want to talk about the task force or
Well,
shrinking population in Austin?
you know, we had a very alarming year where the city lost African American population not only in percentage but in absolute numbers. That's changed, and the absolute numbers are increasing, but the percentage still decreases. The percentage in the region is different. There's a growing African American population in Pflugerville and in some other parts of our city. But what we recognize is that we're not going to be a real as attractive a place for African Americans to stay here and to move here until we change climate and culture and institutions. The Task Force on Institutional Racism pointed out a lot of these. The programs to have the race training and those sessions that Leadership Austin has fully embraced and become probably the lead advocate for. If you're in this room and you haven't experienced that yet,
It's amazing.
You absolutely have to. You should find Christopher standing next to the door and make sure that you get a chance to do that. But we're trying to do more and more with large employers in the city and with HT, other universities, in order to create better pipelines, better opportunities for people, so that there's an attraction and a reason for people to stay here. I mean, we're competing against cities like Atlanta for critical mass of African American populations, and it's hard. Folks, professionals, come here and look around and wonder where all the African Americans are. And that does not create the climate that you want to have in a city if you're trying to build that base, and we know that we need to in this city.
So I want to talk about affordability from all of your different perspectives, because this is a region-wide issue. Are there ways the region is working, and are there ways we could work together in the future to address this growing lack of affordability, not just in Austin, but in your communities? You want to start on that one, Mayor Morgan?
Yeah, so I've served on the council for 9 years, 2 as the mayor, and really, when I talk to my citizens, the last year and a half, maybe last year, is the word affordability is really popped up a lot more than it did prior to on my time on the council. And so we've looked at some things. We just recently changed one of our zoning districts for single family to an SF3 is what we call it. It has a mix of very small lots with very big lots. And so, and it's very popular. It's taken off with some of the developers. And so it has a broad mix of housing stock within that development. Our multifamily has been very strong, of course, and so we've approved several income-based, based on your median income. So our, fire, police, teachers are able to rent if they so choose. In Round Rock, most of our lots are 6,500 square foot lots, and so we don't have the potential. One of the knocks we get from some of the companies that moved to Round Rock is we don't have executive housing. And when I say executive housing, probably over $1 million homes. We've got a couple of neighborhoods that have a few, so we have a lot of stock in that range where people are buying. But the problem is we're out of stock. And so that's why, and we don't have a lot of land left to really develop neighborhoods. We're looking at a lot of mixed use. We're doing our 2030 plan right now, and one of the big, it's kind of the 50-50. There's a lot of people that want mixed use, and there's a lot of people that don't really want it. They still want more residential. The other thing is, I feel like the job of it's our role as the government to do what we can that we have control over. As I mentioned earlier, we have a very low tax rate. It was on the average median home, they paid about $1,000 for the whole year for all those services. We have to continue to provide different kinds of jobs and opportunities. It can't just be the $80,000 jobs. We have a big resort coming in, and some of those jobs are going to be, on a lower level. But we will continue to work on it and focus on it, looking toward what other cities have done. But it's really just now really becoming you hear it a lot more now than, you did, 7 years ago.
Right.
So.
Are there some ways the region can work together to address this growing affordability issue in Central Texas?
Well, I think the cities along 35 and certainly our neighboring cities, Cedar Park, Leander, Pflugerville, Hutto, I think we all have a vested interest in making our communities affordable, and to Mayor Morgan's point of improving the availability of jobs. I know our Economic Development Corporation has been doing a great job of landing some corporate businesses in our community, very much so, has added additional jobs, higher paying jobs, but we need to focus more on recruiting more corporate campuses that provide those sustainable jobs where people can live in Pflugerville and afford housing in Pflugerville. Our housing, obviously, the average home in Pflugerville is about $250,000. We have had a lot of migration from the city of Austin, thank you very much, because the citizens I talked to, we're moving to Pflugerville because we like the schools, we like the landscape, and the type of housing that's available is within their affordability, and that's important. So you've got to have good jobs, you've got to have the housing stock, as Mayor Morgan mentioned, available to the citizens. And in addition, also incentivizing, especially, I've had this request from a teachers group about incentivizing contractors to provide more affordable housing or some type of rebate to teachers, especially that want to live in Pflugerville. We have a lot of teachers that don't live in Pflugerville, and we need them in our community. So we need to at least exercise those efforts to do that. And as our cities are so close together, that we need to share some of those ideas and concepts to be able to do that.
So, Mayor Adler, what are some of the plans in place to prevent that mass exodus to Pflugerville and Round Rock, because people can't afford to live in the city limits of Austin? So many people can't anymore.
Well, the affordability issue, like all other issues, is a regional issue, and anything that happens here has an impact outside of our city and vice versa. We're the fastest growing large metropolitan area. We have been for each of the last 8 years, which is near impossible thing to do mathematically because you're increasing the base. But that's happening. But the percent of that growth that's happening in the city has been rapidly decreasing. So that the real driver of growth in the metropolitan area now are the cities that surround us. We're by our policies, by our land development code, encouraging that and enforcing that movement. And that kind of thing creates demands and pull on the surrounding cities. It makes it more difficult for them to attract commercial bases and retail bases and businesses when that happens. Austin really needs to step up and assume its responsibility to provide housing in our city and not force it all to the outside. And then when we force it all to the outside, we dramatically increase the traffic and congestion issues we have, because people move outside and try to get inside. So there are a lot of things that we need to do. One of them is we need to actually get the land development code rewrite done. This council, I think, by a clear 7-4 majority, maybe 8-3, was able to give direction to the city manager on the land development code rewrite in a way that we were unable to move forward as a council just a year ago. It's hard to recognize what we did if you read some of the social media posts that are circulating, so I urge everybody to actually look at what happened. But there were some really good things that were done. They were measured, and most of them were tied to providing greater permanent affordability in our city, creating that missing middle, the duplexes, the triplexes, and the quads that we don't have in our city, tying entitlements to providing permanent affordability on properties. So we have to do the land development code rewrite. We're changing the land development process to streamline it. We've done a good job, I think, with Rodney, but we still don't have him in control of Austin Energy and the fire department and the water department. But that's happening now. We're putting everybody in the same place physically. That will help. But there are two ways you deal with affordability. You either help make things cost less. That includes things like the housing bond, the $250 million housing bond that we passed. Thank you, everybody, that we are now leveraging to create those opportunities. But it's not only making things cost less, it's helping people have more money to spend, which means that we have to follow through on the regional workforce development plan that the county judge and I initiated, have been approved now by both the Commissioner's Court as well as the City Council. It's not working just in those counties. This is workforce solutions working in the entire region. So I'm working on economic development projects outside of the city of Austin because it provides jobs to the region, because it provides activity centers where people can live close to where they work, and not everybody needs to commute into town.
Courtney, some more questions from the audience.
Sure. Are there any new initiatives to assist the regional homeless population?
I know homelessness is a top priority right now in Austin at the city council level. I'll actually start though with Mayor Morgan. I don't know, do you all in Round Rock and Pflugerville have a serious homeless population?
Not. I mean, I'm not going to sit there and say there's not any homelessness. I think that would be naive to even say or think. But it's not. I wouldn't say it's big, and if it is, it's hidden, maybe more so.
Yeah.
We have organizations that help us in those categories of people that may be in need. They may not be homeless, but clearly maybe need of food. I mean, we have some organizations that serve lunches on all day on Saturday, but it doesn't seem to have reached
the homelessness
in a high level up there. But it's something you got to watch because, as has been mentioned up here, as things migrate and you become a bigger city, all those issues start coming to the forefront. And so,
well, what we've recognized is that, and more, of course, I've served on different boards in the community along with the Education Foundation, so I'm close to the school district, and we've found that we have more homeless students in our school district than I ever realized. Now, those students may not have be in the city limits, perhaps. Some may be, but I think it's time that we as a community, we as a city, begin working with our school districts to identify some of those instances of homelessness, how we can work collaboratively to address that, and we do that every year, especially during the start of the school to help those students. But we don't really have enough information on the families, where they live, and how we can impact them. So I think that's something definitely we can do.
Mayor Adler, I took a tour yesterday of the Arch, and I had never done that before, and it was a very eye-opening experience to see the kind of work that goes on, and I know that we need more places like the Arch and permanent supportive housing and wraparound services. So what do you foresee as some of the issues you all will be tackling in your marathon meetings next week? I think homelessness and the homelessness ordinances, camping and panhandling will be coming up.
You know, that's what I was working on before I rushed over here for the panel here this morning. And what I would say to my colleagues is that, you know, the bet I would take is that this homeless challenge exists in all our surrounding cities, and to a large degree it is hidden. I think you're absolutely right. And I think as your housing prices continue to increase, it's going to become more and more evident. And it's inevitable if you look at cities around the country. Certainly it's a challenge that we have here in our city, and I think that the no sit, no lie and then soliciting ordinance, that issue, I now understand this way. There's certain conduct that exists in our city that presents a public safety risk, and we need to stop that. We need to police that and deal with that. There's certain conduct in our city that presents a public health risk, and we need to stop that. And we need to enforce that. There's also another bucket of folks that are experiencing homelessness, and these are people that are not presenting a public safety risk, and they're not presenting a public health risk. This could be somebody that is sitting outside a restaurant on Congress Avenue and dealing with hidden demons that we can't see, that are flying around them, and they're very much engaged in their reality. And we have that in our city. We have three buckets. We have the public safety bucket, the public health bucket, and then we have there are people in our community that are homeless that need help, and they are part of our community, and they're here. What the council is dealing with right now is we want to have an ordinance that makes it a criminal offense to threaten public safety and a criminal offense to be dealing with public health. But what do we do with that third bucket? I mean, that person that's outside on Congress Avenue, do we want to criminalize the behavior? I mean, is that the right thing to do to that person? It enables us to move that person off the street, and there are a lot of people that call for us to do that. You know, we have tents under overpasses that might not be presenting a public safety risk or a public health risk. It's now more apparent than it's ever been. Is that conduct that we want to criminalize? And my sense in this community is that most people don't want to criminalize, which makes sense, because if you arrest somebody, you give them a ticket. Invariably, they can't pay for the ticket, so it ends up in an arrest warrant. You make it so that that person can't get a house and can't get a job because now they have a criminal record associated with the conduct and behavior that we criminalized. That's not the answer. But there has to be an answer. What is the answer in that third bucket? And that's what the council is dealing with now, making sure we're only criminalizing the things that should be criminalized, but then coming up with real strategies in that third bucket. You know, perhaps we have to create areas in our city where camping is allowed, not just saying where it's not allowed. You know, we have so many people, families, that are homeless and sleeping in their cars on streets in our city, not very safe. We're working with churches or with retail centers to create opportunities where people can park safely, sleep, and we have social services available, wraparound services to be able to help those people move out of the situation they're in. But this only works, as you indicated, this only works if we have places for people to go. So we have to invest in shelters and in immediate housing. But shelters, and that only work if someone goes in and they can get triage. Someone can assess them. What do you need? Do you need mental health help? Do you need physical help? Do you need a job? What do you need? But to get people into a home, because people can't take advantage of the wraparound services if they don't have a home. And they're not going to stay in a shelter, because it's horrible living in a shelter. It's very disruptive. You have to get up early in the morning and you get kicked out and you're on the street, and then you get back in line in the evening. You lose your belongings. Sometimes you can't take in your pets. You might not be able to be there with your partner. What we need to be able to do is make our shelters triage centers and then take people that are in that out of that situation and then immediately placed into a home with the help they need. And that's what we need to invest in as a community. And that's what is, I think, our community's right now highest priority, and it's the highest priority of the City Council. But I think if we keep into account those three buckets and differentiate what we're talking about, that's real important, because the social media conversation about the ordinances that were considered last week and are going to be considered next week, and probably other ordinances in August, conflates the issue of criminality with the issue of what do we need to do to keep our community and our quality of life whole. And one of the advantages that we have in the city of Austin right now, when I look at other cities that are dealing with this, LA, Seattle, Portland, cities that are just really upside down on this issue, we at this point in time have a community that is generally united, almost unanimously, in trying to work with this problem, this challenge, in a way that is sensitive and respectful and empathetic. And we have to maintain that, because at some point, if a community turns and the issue becomes one where folks are being demonized, and we lose sight, we lose the ability to actually be having the conversations we should have. It devolves into what you see happening politically in so many issues around the country. When that happens and it turns, it's near impossible for a community to recover. We are not there. This is a community that is embracing all of this community, recognizing that some of our neighbors are homeless and they need our help and they need our support. And we have a community that is aligned that way right now. And if we can hold on to that, then we're going to be able to resolve this. We have great programs in the city. Alan Graham is sitting over here. And then the program that he has, Mobilos and Fishes and Community First Project. We need that. We need that to expand. We need other housing opportunities for different cohorts, but more than anything else, we need this community to stick together and to not be pulled off by folks on either side of this issue that are trying to make it black and white and something that's where we're demonizing one another in our community.
Well, we have just a few minutes left, and I wanted each of you, and we'll start down here with Mayor Morgan, to share a short-term or even a long-term action step that people in the audience can do to become more civically engaged, more regionally civically engaged.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is really the appropriate group, but a lot of times when I have a conversation with our citizens, and they always ask me, what's been the biggest challenge in the 2 years that you've been the mayor? Social media.
People keep retweeting you, I think you said.
And I don't mean that from them attacking me. I'm a big boy, I can take it. What I mean, though, is if there's a piece of information that is out there, I encourage each of you, and even to maybe educate your fellow friends, to make sure they look at the information and really understand, is that what is going on? And what we've started in Round Rock, when I came on as mayor, I told the city manager, we have got to get our citizens engaged, because in Round Rock you've got very low voter turnout. And what we have started is a program we call University, and it's a 10-week program, and we have citizens that come in every Monday night for 10 weeks. They get served dinner, and they get to go through every department. And what we've seen on our Facebook social media is some of our biggest naysayers are now our biggest supporters, because we've explained and educated. And we just graduated our first teen university class last night. And these weren't kids that were in trouble. These were kids that were really engaged. The majority of them were coming to UT. Some were going to William and Mary. One said they wanted to be the president of the United States, and he was dead serious. And so I think that more than anything is it's hard for us as elected officials to tweet back a response that you can just say in 180 characters.
Some elected officials have no trouble tweeting.
Well, that's true. That's true. And some of them, and good point. And some of them ought to be more careful. That's a two-way street. That's not just back and forth. That's a two-way street on that. And then lastly, I'd say long-term, get engaged in something in your community that you have a passion for, and then be a leader of it. And be that leader to come and talk to us, because you're the ones that have the foot in the door to come talk to elect. A lot of people are hesitant to do that. You'd be surprised when I meet with some citizens, they're like, I can't believe the mayor showed up at my office. Well, I'm the mayor for all our citizens. I will meet with anybody. Even if they don't like me, I'll meet with them. But that's my job. I didn't get elected by a few to serve a few. And so I always encourage them, get involved, get passionate about something, and we're starting to see a lot more engagement in Round Rock, a lot more people getting involved in our commissions, a lot more people getting involved in our elections and running for office. And so that's what I would leave. Short term, don't believe everything you read. Long term, get engaged and get passionate about
So we don't
something.
have too much time left, but yeah, maybe just a short term.
Yeah. Well, I have a call to action for this group, because you're here for a reason, for a purpose, certainly to hear from these wonderful mayors that are sitting before you. But I would say understand the information, the demographics, the trends, and the culture shift to begin that healing process that'll enable people, to enable groups, to enable you and the associations and organizations you belong to, and regional partners, to make changes from a policy, from a growth, and an administrative process, because you're the ones that enable those changes through your influence, through your connections, and certainly with the help and support of your elected officials that are sitting here or sitting wherever they're sitting as far as you're concerned. So do that, and I think we're on the right track.
Wonderful. Mayor Adler, wrap it up.
Well, I'd just like really to take this time to say that it's an absolute honor and privilege to serve with these mayors at this table. We are acting more regionally than we have ever before. We just went through a legislative session. We had mayors on the phone weekly, over 30 mayors from across the state. And these guys were among the group participating in that. Cities are working now in ways they have never worked before across party. Even in this legislature that we were working, the cities that were leading that were the Central Texas contingent, together with the mayors from Amarillo and Lubbock, Republican mayors, not just the mayors from Dallas and Houston and Austin and San Antonio. So I think that having this session here today, having a regional focus on it, is absolutely the right thing to do. You know, they say that the next main metroplex in the country is going to be going from Georgetown down to San Antonio, demographically. And I think that that's true. We're going to find ourselves tied to the hip in ways that we are now only beginning to really recognize. And it's starting off in a great foot, these folks. It's an honor to work with you both.
Well, just a heartfelt thank you to Mayor Adler, Mayor Gonzales, and Mayor Morgan for sharing this regional perspective with us this morning.